In this video, I'm going to show you how to place your alternator on this Lexus IS250. This is mounted to the front of your engine on the driver's side. Let's get started. On the passenger side of the engine bay near the firewall, you'll find your battery. And on the left side of the battery, as you're looking at it, you'll see the negative terminal. With a 10mm socket or wrench, loosen this mounting nut up. With it loosened up, that should release the terminal off of the battery. Take it off and tuck it to the side where it can't make connection with the terminal. Now we have to remove this cover, and it's just held on with a bunch of push clips, so we'll go around, pop them all out with a trim tool, and then remove the cover. We have to remove this plastic bracket for this wiring harness. 3 10mm headed mounting nuts hold it on. Remove them all. Now you can pull up on this. That's all we need. Below we have this plastic cover that has some plastic retainers, kind of like mounting nuts. You can take them off either by hand, or you can help yourself out with a 12mm socket, since that is technically the size of these plastic nuts. The last one is going to be straight down here. With those off, unclip the wiring harness and pull this shield out of the way. We have to take the belt off, at least just off of the alternator. We'll need a 14mm socket or a ratcheting wrench to get on the tensioner here so we can pull tension off of the belt and slip the belt off. I recommend going in from the other side, getting your socket or whatever tool you're using on there. Pressing down, getting your belt slipped off of the idler because it's the easiest one to reach, and the alternator, and releasing your tool. Now your tool is most likely going to remain stuck there, so use something that you don't need for the rest of the job. The tensioner has so much swing in it that it's actually going to push it up into the thermostat housing, and I recommend just leaving it there for the rest of the job. When it comes time to installing it, you can just press it right back down and put your belt on. Next, we have to remove the idler pulley so we can make space for the alternator to come out. Use a 14mm socket, break this bolt free, and remove it the rest of the way. Make sure it all comes off. On the side of the alternator, you'll see this wiring harness that has a retainer right here. I'm gonna pinch it with some needle nose pliers and just pull it off. We'll set that aside. On the alternator, you'll see 2 14mm headed bolts. Let's break them both free and remove them. One's going to be at the top right as you're looking at it. And the other one at the bottom left where the belt is. This upper one is longer than the lower one, remember that. Now the last piece of hardware we have is going to be on the back side of the alternator. You'll access it, well, pretty much from either down underneath here, or you're gonna have to go on the back side of it. And I'll just give you a quick look here. You can see this mounting nut right here that's on the stud with that bracket. That's the one we have to remove, and that's the only way to free up this alternator because this is the third mounting point on the alternator. So you'll need to get a deep 12mm socket and a 3-inch extension on a ratchet. That's going to be the perfect combination to get down there and remove that mounting nut. I'm using a stubby ratchet so I can actually get some turning radius in there. And at this point, the mounting nut is ready to come off. Oh, actually, I pulled the whole stud out. So that actually works to my advantage, but if it just pulls the nut off, that's totally fine too. Now the pry bar, we're going to have to pry it away from the top. Careful what you pry on. There's a lot of delicate items in the way here. Okay. And now what we have to do is maneuver it down and towards the frame rail so it can slide away from that bottom bracket. Bring it forward. And now that we are able to move it around, we can get to the connectors for this alternator a little bit better. So there's the main power wire right here. I'm gonna grab a pick so I can come down and remove this boot. That boot needs to be taken off so we can access the mounting point for that wire. Be very careful when you do this with a pick so that you don't damage the boot. We will need to reuse it. Use a 10mm socket to unbolt this mounting nut. There we go. That was very tight. If you have a magnet, that's going to be the easiest thing to get this mounting nut away. Pull the wire off. Set that aside. We do have one more connector, which is this right here. The locking tab is on the back side. I'm able to get my hand down here and push on that tab and disconnect the connector. And now we can wiggle the alternator out of place. And there it is. Now we have to kind of twist it and turn it. I'm going to remove this stud with an E6 inverted torque socket because the alternator keeps hitting it, and it will make it a lot easier to finish removing it if this is not in the way. All right, we'll set this aside safely, and we'll reinstall it, of course, after the alternator is back in. We just grab onto this, twist it, turn it, and lift it right up and out. And there's the alternator. With a 10mm socket, let's transfer this bracket that sits on the top of the alternator over to the new one. Just snug it. With an E6 inverted Torx, we'll transfer this little stud over to the new one. We'll snug it up. And lastly, this bracket down here with a 12mm. We'll snug that up as well. All right, let's get the new alternator in. Just slide it back the same way that the old one came out. Okay, so what we're trying to do is slide it back over the brackets, top and bottom. You can see the top one right here. Oh, there we go. Well, I got that. Before we go too far, let's plug in this connector while we can still access it somewhat easily. It's pretty difficult to see. Oh, I lined it up, and we'll listen for a click. Okay, so that is secured. Let's move this so we can double check it visually. Okay, yeah, that's locked in. So now we have to put the main power wire back on before we resecure the alternator. Okay, make sure those two tabs, they line up in those two holes. Very important. And what I'm going to do is I have my mounting nut on the end of my magnet, so I can slide it down into position. All right, that's started and bottomed out by hand. Let's get a socket on there to tighten it up. Okay, we'll tighten this up, get it nice and snug, about 1/8 of a turn after it bottoms out at most. You don't want to break that stud internally. It's made of a softer metal, so it's very easy to damage. Okay, this boot has to go back over now. Perfect. All right, so that's plugged in, the boot is on. Now we can finally secure the alternator. So we'll get the top bolt in first because it seems to be somewhat lined up. This is the longer of the two bolts. So we'll slide it in through the front. Try to get this in position. Okay, got that one in. And we'll try to get the lower bolt started. The hardest part here is to support the alternator and thread it in at the same time, of course without cross-threading anything. All right, I got this started. It's threading in smoothly. I'll give it a few turns, but I'm not going to bring it close or bottom it out at all because we still have to line up that bracket, which is really hard to see, and we do need the alternator to be able to move around so that we can actually line that stud up. All right, so we got this bracket pretty much lined up for the alternator. At this point, I'm going to reach in here and put that stud in. Now, the stud is going to be separate from the nut. I separated them. It's going to be a lot easier to do it that way. And also, it's going to ensure that we can properly tighten everything. For the stud, you need an E8 inverted torque socket. All right, I got the extension with my socket in there. I had to use two hands, so I was able to move the alternator with one and spin the extension with my other hand. So now we'll just keep threading it in. Okay, so here's the current situation. I have one hand through the front, one through the back. The one from the front is holding my ratchet and socket, and the one that's going in from the strut tower area is spinning the ratchet, and that's pretty much the only way you're gonna get this in. Snug this up the best you can. Doesn't have to be crazy tight. When you put the mounting nut on, that's going to fully tighten it. But however you can reach it, I have a small 1/4-inch ratchet, and there we go. I just gave it a quick snug into the engine block, and that, as you can see, is fully seated. I'm gonna leave it like that, and now we'll put the mounting nut on. And now I have my mounting nut on the end of my socket. I put a piece of paper towel in there in between the nut and the socket so it can actually hold it on. And I'm going to try to thread it onto the stud. Now, I did clean the threads on that stud, so it should be a little bit easier to thread on than it was to remove, and it looks like it's working. So I'll just give it a few turns until I can get a ratchet on there and fully tighten it. Now, I will leave this for last. That's bottomed out right there. I will leave this mounting nut for last. Let's tighten up the other two bolts, and then we'll come back to this, because all this does is clamp it to the engine block and help support it. The other two bolts is what center it up so that we make sure the belt is actually riding properly. Okay, let's finish tightening these two front bolts. Those are snug. Torque these two bolts to 32 foot-pounds. Keep in mind the top one has a metal bushing that has to slide in to clamp on, so as you tighten it, it might take a little bit, and then eventually it should actually tighten up. All right, those are torqued. Now we can move over to the lower mounting nut that's on that stud, and we'll torque that to 15 foot-pounds if you can, because you might not be able to get a torque wrench in there, in which case that's not that much, 15 foot-pounds, so just do your best to get it nice and tight. Okay, got that mounting nut tightened up. Reattach this wiring harness on the alternator. For me, this was not attached to begin with, but clip it back in. And then at the top on this stud that we had to transfer over, clip this harness back in. Let's put this stud back on here on the front of the engine. Just snug it up, that's plenty. And put on this cover. We'll secure it with the 3 plastic nuts. On this side, we'll also secure this harness. All right, and that's secured. Put the 3 mounting nuts back onto the bracket for this main harness at the top, and then we'll snug them up. Get the idler pulley back on. Make sure that washer on the bolt is still there, and just thread it back in all the way. We'll bottom it out, and the torque for this will be 32 foot-pounds. On the screen, you can see the diagram of the belt routing. Just in case yours fell off or you took it off, here is how you put it back on. Line it up with all of the pulleys, and then once you are able to, push down on the tensioner to release tension. Then we'll slip it over the alternator, then underneath this idler pulley. Make sure it's seated in all of the grooves on all the pulleys, and you want to make sure that on the flat pulleys it isn't falling off. All right, double checking it visually really quick. I can see it's on the water pump correctly now. Top and bottom, it's around the tensioner correctly, harmonic balancer, AC compressor, alternator, and the idler. Everything is centered. So I can now remove my tool, and that belt is reinstalled. Now reinstall this cover and put back all the push clips that held it on. And that's installed. Now let's reconnect the battery. It might make a little spark, that's normal. Make sure it's pressed down all the way, and then take your 10mm socket or ratchet and tighten up this mounting nut. I got it snug. I'm going to stop right there. As long as you can't spin this terminal with the mounting nut snugged up, that's plenty tight. If you go any tighter than that, it'll actually stretch this, and then it won't make a good connection in the future. That is properly secured.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.